today, December 18th, the regular meeting at Sonoma City Council. And if I could ask former mayor and former council member Larry Barnett to say the pledge for us. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cook?
Here.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrington? Councilmember Hunley? Here. Mayor Agramonte?
Here.
Thank you.
What am I doing? Okay. So approval of agenda. At this time, members of the public may comment. Where's the dedications? Oh. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. Pardon? Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. I'm out of sync. Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
May I have a roll call for this, please? Thank you.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Hunley?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you.
So at this time, I'd like to read. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less under state law unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act. The merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time of the item that the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged by the mayor, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone. Begin by stating stating and spelling your name and address.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Larry Barnett, 67 5th Street East. I'm up here tonight to once again recommend that you abandon the rule that requires the agreement of a majority of the council to place an item on the agenda. Now, let me point out that this is not a rule that's in the municipal code. It's not a state law. It's not a law at all. It's just a convention that the council has adopted, and it hasn't been a convention for very long. When I was on the council for 12 years, we didn't have that rule. Any member of the council could place an item on the agenda. I point out to you, moreover, that staff doesn't require the majority of the council to agree to place something on the agenda. City staff comes up with something they think's important. They make sure it gets on the agenda. And they weren't elected by anyone. You were elected by the citizens of Sonoma, and you represent the citizens of Sonoma. And the citizens of Sonoma look for you to exercise the proper advocacy of their interests. I know that you respect each other. I know that there's differences between your political philosophies or your approach to things. When I was on the council, there were Republicans, there were Democrats, there were people, frankly, that I'd find hard to define. But the fact of the matter is, we all understood that we were equally elected to the office, that we were there to do the job. We respected each other enough to assume and to function so that if a member of the body wished to bring something forward to the body, that they had the prerogative to do it. Now, it needs to be scheduled. That's why the mayor and the city manager meet to talk about, what the load on the agenda is, and what's the appropriate number of things to go on an agenda, and how long it might take, to prepare for it. That's all appropriate. But the fact is that tonight we're going to have a discussion about whether you're going to have a discussion. I know Councilman Edwards doesn't like to waste time at city council meetings. But you know what? If you agree to what is being proposed tonight, we're going to have this discussion all over again. Because you can't have a discussion about the pros and cons about putting something on the agenda without having a discussion of the pros and cons of the issue. it's really a waste of the public's time. To me, countervenes the confidence that the public has in its public officials, that they know what's best to bring to the agenda, and it doesn't respect the essential process of democracy. It's an easy rule to change. Unfortunately, you're going to have a majority who agree to discuss changing it. So irony on top of irony. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Going to be tough to follow. Michelle Ritchie, R-I-C-H-E-Y, 215 East Watmo. I was watching the news the other night. They were talking about the late Mayor Lee of San Francisco. They were saying how he kept honor in public service. And it got me to thinking how rare this is these days. Anybody elected into office is a public servant. Public servants take into consideration and enact legislature to help the public as a whole group, all of us, not just special interest groups. And then it made me think of you and how fortunate that the city of Sonoma has public servants that serve with honor, honesty, and integrity. I truly appreciate all the hard work, time spent, and honor that all of you give to serve us. Merry everything to all of you. But as a side note, I asked Santa if he could possibly bring us just cause eviction and rent stabilization.
Thank you.
Hi, George Thompson, 311 Nicole Lane, Sonoma, California. I was here last week or the week before, or last time, asking about getting Trump impeached. Just wondering if you got that done yet. I was hoping. Today I'm here to gripe a little bit about Measure E. Remember Measure E? If I recall, each and every one of you supported it. And I was one of the leaders of the anti-Measure E campaign because I thought that as a partial taxpayer, I didn't want to underwrite continued failed management of the hospital by Kelly Mather and friends. Last Thursday, Kelly fired 4 frontline nurses, which upsets me a great deal. 1 day notice, and I was at the Real after the firing, and the administrative. I don't really know what this connection is between the hospital and the city council, but I was at the Real. The administrative branch were having a big Christmas party. They looked very cheerful, and I was with one of the nurses that had gotten fired, and it wasn't a cheerful situation for her. Meanwhile, Kelly Mathers is taking home about $400,000 a year. She's getting a $35,000 Christmas bonus. I wish I was getting a $35,000 Christmas bonus for mismanaging my company. Her chief financial officers all make over $200,000, and meanwhile they're firing frontline nurses that have been there for over 18 years. There's just something wrong here. I'm just griping about it because I was one of the head people of the anti-E campaign, and I didn't like to be taxed for what I feel is ongoing poor management at the hospital. I probably wouldn't be griping if Kelly would say, hey, we're tightening our belt. I'm going to pass on the bonus. I'm going to pass on my raise. But instead, she's pretty much gutted the home health care side of the hospital now. And she's probably got hard decisions to make, but I just want you to know the people are doing that you people supported with your Measure E yes vote, and 68% of Sonomans voted for that as well. So I don't know what to say or do. I'm disappointed in what I see going on over there.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Hello, City Council members. I'm Matt Metzler, 1110 Friar Creek Drive, and I'm currently chair of your Community Services and Environment Commission. And in the interest in reducing my contribution to greenhouse gases, I rode my bicycle to this meeting tonight instead of driving. It's not raining. I have a warm jacket, so it's fine. But I'm here tonight because I take seriously the purpose of the commission to advise you on matters related to the preservation and enhancement of the natural environment under jurisdiction of the city. And I'd like to make a suggestion for the council to mull over as you move forward. And as you know, overseeing special events falls under the purview of the commission. And I've pursued initiatives on the commission that are designed to help reduce the environmental impacts of the special events. And however, what the commission has done towards this goal has been somewhat piecemeal, I feel. And I'd like to advance the idea that the city special events market themselves as regional and industry leaders in green and sustainable special events. This is why I've advocated improved bike access to the plaza, reduction in plastic waste generated at special events, and sustainable practices at special events. So I think that spreading the word that special events in Sonoma are sustainable would be good for the event, good for business, and good for the environment. And I think that the Sonoma sustainability goal could be extended to other tourist-related businesses in town. So the council, working together with the Community Services Environmental Commission, the Special Events Director, the Visitors Bureau, and the Tourist Improvement District, could really make Sonoma stand out as both locally and regionally as a place where environmental sustainability is put into practice. So this is just something I'd like you to, the council to keep in mind as you move forward. Thank you for your service to the citizens of Sonoma.
Thank you, Mr. Metzger. Oh, I thought he was going to speak.
Ken Brown, 1396, City of Sonoma. I'm not going to repeat what's been said, but I agree with Larry, Shelley, and Matt.
Logan Harvey, 578 Estimadera Drive. So I'm speaking tonight representing Sonoma Valley Democrats Environmental Committee. And in keeping with the ideas brought up just recently about sustainable events, we would also like to start asking the question if there's a way that we can reduce the amount of single-use plastics that are being used within town, either just for events specifically or within businesses as well. As I think a lot of us are aware, there's a massive problem with plastics getting into our oceans. These things take thousands and thousands of years to decompose, and there are a lot of other options that can be used. For example, I know at Sonoma Market, there's lunches that are available for people to microwave and take out with them. And these lunches are used on a daily basis, and your daily lunch is going to be around for thousands of years because that plastic is not recyclable. I went to Marin recently, and I Marin, whatever, but there was a grocery store there, and they had glass containers that you would pay a $2 deductible on, returned back to the store, and they would be washed, and your money would be returned to you. So it's essentially the same price of lunch, but you're no longer polluting into the environment. And if there's ways that we can make that either incentivized for businesses to go after or required that they go after, it would be positive. And I think in our Sonoma Plaza, in keeping with our kind of desire to be a little bit greener than the rest of the country or than the rest of the state, I mean, today our president decided to take climate change off of the things that are national security risks. I think it would be good to kind of step forward and say, okay, if you're going to do an event in the plaza, you got to remove single-use plastics and find either paper or things like that that are easily decomposable to be used instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey.
Good evening. Dave Ransom, live in Santa Rosa, go to church in Sonoma. I have good news tonight. Can you pull the microphone to your mouth? Oh, yes, there we go. Dave Ransom, live in Santa Rosa. I go to church in Sonoma. I have good news, and that is that some weeks ago, a LLC that represents, that owns and manages some 50 mobile home parks tried to raise the rent in Petaluma by more than 50% on 77 units, mostly of Latino residents. That's rent, that's land rent, not apartment rent. It's a mobile home park. And between the Sonoma Mobile Home Owners Association, the North Bay Organizing Committee, and the Legal Aid of Sonoma County, they went up against them, and today the guys backed off and said, okay, we're not going to raise the rents. That was on the basis of rent gouging after the governor's proclamation. So we do have some good news here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ransom. I got to get over this cold. I'd like to close the public comment. I have a meeting dedication. I would like to dedicate this evening to Marilyn Duggan Caselli. Marilyn Duggan Caselli passed away on Sunday, December 10th. And, you know, of course, she and her brother Leonard ran Duggan's mortuary. I knew the Duggan family very well, especially from the San Mateo County family. Not this one as much, but his sister Susan Duggan, of course, I knew. And Marilyn, known as Mare, was the loving mother of Michael Caselli, and of course, her sister Susan Duggan as well. So I would like to dedicate this meeting to her this evening, and she was a big part of this community. So, yes.
And Mayor, I just wanted to acknowledge the passing of the San Francisco Mayor, Ed Lee.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't know if you watched the ceremony. I did. I have a cold and I'm home, so I have nothing to do. And, but thank you so much. He really was something. And so at this point, I'd like to, I'm moving on to the consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single vote motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, the council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Does anybody want to do that?
Just a question. Could you briefly explain item 4.2 and what led to the increase that we're asking for and what we're getting for it? It's the Water Master Plan update. Yeah.
Councilmember Henley and members of the council, there are two main aspects of the increase. One had to do with the nature of the data that the city was able to provide to the consultant. It took the consultant a lot more time than they expected to analyze the data and get it in a form that they could use to model the water system appropriately. And you know, when a consultant proposes to do work, they do their best estimate of the time it's going to take to provide the services. And in this case, they expected the data to be in a different form than it was. And it took a lot of work to transform the data to a useful form. And then the original scope of work was sort of simple, to just update the prior master plan. And then the city hired a new public works director. And I came in and wanted to make sure that the water master plan was comprehensive enough to provide the information we needed to go into a water rate setting. scenario. And so I asked them to look at a few other things that I thought were important to the community. One was to make sure that we were looking at sustainability and being prepared with enough groundwater resources if the Russian River had issues, or the aqueduct that brings the water to Sonoma from the Russian River had issues, we would be dependent on our groundwater supply. And that hadn't been a big factor in the prior water master plan. It wouldn't have been in the update without specifically asking for that to be looked at, to make sure that if we were setting rates that we took those into account. I also asked to look at the advanced water metering infrastructure that a lot of communities are going towards right now, so that if the community was interested in that, we'd have enough information to make informed decisions, so we wouldn't have to wait a whole month to know what was going on with our water usage as water customers.
Is that a smart meter? Is that what that is?
We
Or is that
call them
different?
advanced metering
Oh.
infrastructure,
Smart
because
meter
PG&E
power.
called those smart meters, and
Okay,
they
yeah,
didn't
yeah,
go over very
sure.
well. But and there was a third item that I'm trying to remember what the other thing was I asked for, but they were specific things that I asked the consultant to make sure that were addressed in the water master plan, so that we would be well prepared for the future with a water rates study.
Thank you. Two other quick questions. So item 4.4, it's $92,890, but it's my understanding that this money has already been set aside, so we're not taking this out of anything. We've already budgeted for it.
That's correct. This is money to basically replace the city's laptops and desktops, which are 6 years plus old. And so what we do is we set money aside in the budget, and we have a replacement fund. So this is coming out of our MIS replacement fund.
Okay, I'm not going to ask my third question.
So any other questions? I've asked that 4.5 be pulled at this point, so, let's see. So I go to the public. So I'm sorry, I'd like to take this out to the public.
You're doing great, Madam Mayor.
Oh,
You're
thank
doing
you. I'm
awesome.
so full of whatever's up in my brain, so I'm doing the best. Thank
You're
you.
doing wonderful. Chris Petlock, 426 Napa Road. I'd like to pull the minutes from 6-5, please.
All right, thank you. So it looks, 4.5, right? 4.5. So could I have approval? Close public comment. And so I'd like to ask what the pleasure of this council is. We've been asked to pull 4.5, and of course, 6.5.17 of 4.5.
I make a motion to approve items 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and 4.4 of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Mayor Agarmonte?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, city manager for 4.5, thank you.
So, Mayor and Council, on tonight's agenda, there are a number of minutes, and I did want to talk to Council a little bit in the community about we've got a bit of a backlog, and explain kind of why this is. This is not how we typically like to do business, but as Council knows, we have been trying to implement a variety of new technology and software, and we've done that primarily with our existing staff. We didn't hire a lot of new folks to come in and do this. So Rebecca Barr, our city clerk, has been wearing a couple of hats. She's been the project manager for our new Civic Web portal that we started this last year to make it easier for the public to get to meetings, watch things on video on different size tablets, and basically have a one-stop shopping for agenda and commission business. And then the other thing is the upgrade to our website itself, which we rolled shortly after the fire as a way to have better tools and be able to provide better information to the public. And we'll do a more official rollout of that in January. So with that, the minutes, which is that history of the council, those have gotten backed up, and we apologize for that. But we're going to have today we've got a number, and then in January, we will be bringing the rest of 2017, and we'll get caught up, and then we'll stay current. I think it is important just for the public to know also that with our new Civic Web portal, the minutes, the actual meeting, the video is available right after the meeting, so folks can watch, and that's one of the improvements that's been done. So happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
Who is doing the minutes?
So the minutes currently, what we've started to do is we have Rebecca add on in about July or so, when we realized we were backlogged and just weren't going to be able to get through them. We looked for a consultant. This is kind of a retired clerk or clerk. I don't remember the exact nature of someone who does this, and we're able to basically contract a piece of this out, and then Rebecca reviews them when they come back in. And with the workload that we have as city staff, it has become an efficient way to try to catch up, and then going forward. I think with our lean staff, there's a variety of things that they're trying to do, and when you're doing minutes, it takes concentrated, uninterrupted time to go through, listen to the video, and try to put those minutes together. So at this point, we do have a contractor that's been assisting us, and our plan would be to move forward and continue that forward. Some cities have gone to more action minutes, which do require less time to do. This council a prior council approved action minutes, but that has not been implemented at this time. So that's where we currently are.
How much is that? How much does that cost?
I'm going to turn it to Rebecca. She's got a broader sense.
It is a hourly rate based on whether we choose to pay her hourly rate or per hour of the meeting. And the hourly rate for her, if we do it through her, which we typically do the meeting, it's a time and a half for the meeting, so it's 125 hours per hour of the meeting, $125 per hour of meeting.
It's $125 per hour is the cost of the meeting. And what meetings are they doing? Only the city council or other meetings?
Currently, they're only doing the city council.
And I guess the question is, so the process is that the person watched the videotape, but they're not present here.
No, but they're watching they're watching the video. They are putting the draft together, and then they're reviewed by the city clerk. And I do want to say for the council and community that this process happens in a lot of places. A number of cities, through the recession and through reductions, cut a lot of their administrative staff. And so using a contractor to help put something together is a way. It's something we have looked at for our planning commission as well. Planning commission, those note that I do not think that's started yet, but those minutes are done by our planning director, and also take a lot of time to put together. And so this is a way to potentially, and we've been able to find money within our budget to absorb and do this today.
So what's the difference with action minutes? Because I've always found that one sentence summarizing, 5 minutes of talking has never been actually accurate. So what's action minutes look like?
I'll let Rebecca kind of elaborate on that.
Well, action minutes, if you're taking action minutes, you're getting back to the core minutes, which are the legislative history of the city. That's what the minutes are. They've turned into more of a summary of what's been said, who said what, but it's really the actual legislative history of the city when you do action minutes. So it's the direction that council gave. It captures all of the direction, you give direction to staff, and then it captures all the motions. It captures the public that's speaking. But it doesn't capture all the dialogue that goes along. Typically, you don't see a city go to that unless you have a video that is available to the public to back it up.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions, comments? I just have one, request. When we discussed this today, it's not a resolution, it was just a conclusion of the discussion, that there will be more attention paid to the turnaround of the minutes. And I think whatever system you've worked on, you're saying that perhaps within, did I understand within a month we'll have the whole minutes for the 2 meetings?
I don't think it'll happen within a month, but I think we can get them turned within 60 days. That is a more typical standard, and what we can make sure happens goes forward.
Okay. And then I know that Mr. Petlock spoke and said he'd like to take a look at 6:17 minutes from the closed session.
So are you opening the public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes, I'd like to open up the public comment.
Thank you for recognizing me, Madam Mayor. So I asked to pull these because I have some concerns. First, we have a local government that purports high value on transparency and communication. So we have months and months and months that we didn't get these minutes. And I've been asking, I've had several conversations with staff on how some decisions that came out of that meeting were made. So here they are. And then we get the oral report. When we look back at the oral report in the video, it has nothing to do with what's written on those minutes. I mean, there's nothing there. It doesn't say that at all in the video. So I'm just kind of wondering where that came from. That the statements on the June 5th, it's kind of spun. I mean, it's really kind of crafted very nicely. It's definitely not what was any verbal or oral report that came out of that evening. So I have some questions. Who was in the meeting, including staff and outside counsel? Why the sudden appearance of the minutes now? Typically closed sessions, even if minutes are taken, they're not published. So when were these compiled? I've asked for drafts of this. Was this just appeared on Thursday and out on Friday? So again, just asking, just for a reminder, this is a Public Request Act. I can just ask. I don't need any specific language. Anyone here can just ask. We can ask for this information. We're entitled to it. And it should come forth promptly when it's ready. How does this session, as described in the minutes, comply with the narrow scope of such meetings allowed by the Brown Act? Was a vote taken in this meeting? Was it a straw vote? If a vote was taken, was it recorded? We would like to know. I mean, there's a lot of money moving around here, and we want to know how you voted. Who didn't vote? We're entitled to that information. So next is the city going to cure any violations by reholding the discussion in public and sharing that public information as it should have been privy 6 months ago? We turned in a petition with over 500 signatures of Sonomans asking for this information. Nothing came from you. So is the city confident that it has adequate financial controls? We were told there was going to be sequestration. We haven't seen anything showing that money has been sequestered. We haven't seen anything. How do you even know if you can sequester the money? How do you know if the city is even financially viable to sequester that money? Love to hear about it. And can the city assure the public that there was no misappropriation of public funds for the benefit of any individuals? Again, we've been asking these questions, and again we have heard nothing. And I know rumors, but we have not seen anything concrete. So in response to that, I have two things. First is I'm asking the city to cure and rehold this hearing. I know it's a little late, but I'll let people smarter than me argue about whether the 90-day matters in this instance, since we had no access to any minutes and we couldn't see that any violations had occurred. And then next I'm asking that...
Mr. Petlock, your time is up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then, so then I'm asking that the city then cease
Petlock,
and desist.
I'm the mayor. Your time is up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, let's see. Thank you. Any further public comment?
Thank you so much.
Good evening, Council. Larry Barnett again. I wasn't here specifically for this matter of the minutes, but I did look online to see what the actual content and detail of those minutes include. And my concern is that while it's appropriate, from my understanding and experience, to have a closed session as a council when there is a threat of litigation to talk about the specific issues pertaining to the threat of that litigation, it is not, from my recollection, appropriate to be making decisions in a closed session, which should appropriately be part of a public session to give the public an opportunity to express their opinion about the decisions that are being made. In other words, you could have decided at a closed session that, yes, we need to sequester funds. That was, a response to the litigation that you might want to do to, for example, quote-unquote, cut something off at the pass. However, that discussion about the sequestering of funds and the amount and why and the formula and the basis for it and how much should have been part of a public meeting. Once you've made the decision you want to do it, the public shouldn't be deprived of the opportunity to express its opinion and to understand fully what the issues are that, and the calculations thereof, that pertain to that sequester of funds. So I would agree with Mr. Petlock, while it would seem late, and I have no idea as to why it took 6 months to get the minutes of a meeting, but now that the minutes have been produced and having looked at them, it looks to me that a number of the topics on that agenda are topics appropriately brought forth back to the public, give the public an opportunity to hear the rationale, the reasons, and express their opinions as to how they feel about the decision, whether it's right or wrong, whatever it is, and to fully understand it. At this point, the city has taken some very specific actions pertaining to public funds about which the community has had no input. And now that we've reached the point that it's clear that that was the type of action that was taken at a closed session, I would recommend reopening this matter to the public to essentially, if appropriate, make the same decision as a council as to what you made previously, but to not ignore the opportunity for the public to have its input and participation in how its money either gets segregated, spent, or otherwise used. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnett.
Thank you. I'm going to send some chicken soup over to Councilor Harrington.
I'm falling apart here.
I know you are. Okay. I am reading this on behalf of Chris Petlock, and I'll be very quick. Richard Silver, 95 Bernhardt Avenue. Dear Madam Mayor and members of the council, this letter is to call your attention to the draft minutes released December 15th.
Mr. Silver, just
Yeah.
a moment. May I ask the city attorney?
What?
Could I have an opinion on this, please?
Why can I not read this?
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Is this a repetition of what he's already said?
No.
I don't know what the council policy is on that issue. Can somebody who's run out of time then give his or her speech to the next person? If that person runs out of time, they give it to the next person, and I don't know.
Well, I thought each person's entitled to their own 3 minutes.
I don't know what the
That's
history
true.
is.
That's not I'm not sure it's your own 3 minutes. But
When I was the mayor, it was the mayor's prerogative.
okay.
If I read it, it's my call. Am I correct? Councilors?
Well,
Former mayors?
We're not looking to the audience for an answer.
Well, I'm
Mr.
looking to
Silver.
3 attorneys.
That's where you have to give us a moment, please. So historically, I have seen it go both ways. I'll allow that.
I'd like to hear it.
Okay, we'll allow it.
Thank you. What I'd like to say is I'm going to read it, and if you and council decide, you can redact it, but at least the public gets it. Okay. Number 1, discontinue 2 transfers. The city will discontinue 2 transfers, i.e. transfers for franchise fees and for in lieu property taxes from the water fund to the general fund, fiscal year 17-18 budget, in light of changes in state law. The new water rate study will review and confirm what indirect costs of water service are appropriately charged to the water utility. 2, sequester 3 years of past transfers. This is a cease and desist request. We'll also sequester the funds transferred the last 3 fiscal years under those 2 categories above, pending the outcome of the upcoming water rate study and development of an updated cost allocation plan. A thorough review of all impacts and costs to the general fund and water fund will be determined. If the amount of those prior transfers is not fully justified by cost general fund currently incurs for the benefit of the water utility, then the city council intends to return the appropriate, quote, true up, unquote, portion of these funds to the water utility for the benefit of water customers. Any funds that are returned to the water utility will reduce future water rates for our customers, since this will mean additional water resources in the water utility fund. Although the city is not required to make changes in rate-making assumptions retroactively in light of new cost data. The City Council wishes to do so to ensure transparency and public confidence in the city's rate-making. This action was not in compliance with the Brown Act because it occurred as the culmination of discussion in closed session as a matter which the Act does not permit to be discussed in closed session, and there was no adequate notice to the public on the posted agenda for the meeting and for the matter acted upon would be discussed. And there was no finding of fact made by the City Council that urgent action was necessary on a matter unforeseen at the time the agenda was posted. In the event it appears that that the conduct of the Sonoma City Council specified herein did not amount to the taking of action, I call to your attention Section 54952.6, which defines action taken for the purpose of the act expansively as a, quote, collective decision made by the majority of the members of a legislative body, a collective commitment to promise or promised by a majority of the members of a legislative body to make a positive or negative decision, or an actual vote by a majority of the members of a legislative body when sitting as a body or entity upon a motion, proposal, resolution, order, or ordinance. As you're aware, the Brown Act creates specific agenda obligations for notifying the public with a brief description of each of the items discussed acted upon. The citizens of Sonoma demand an unconditional commitment to cease the past practice of taking action in closed session, depriving the public of information it's entitled to under the Brown Act, Section 54960.2. IBID. I'm running out of time. The Sonoma City Council has 30 days to respond to this cease and desist and shall be approved by the council in open session. Respectfully yours, Chris Petlock.
Thank you, Mr. Silver. Thank you so much.
Thank you for...
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Having none, I'm going to close the public hearing. And at this point, I think we're looking at approval of 4.5.
I'll make a motion to approve item 4.5 of the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Council, could you hold just for one moment? Okay, please move ahead. Sorry, just wanted to double check something.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Hunley?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now turning your attention to 6.1 of the regular calendar. And at this point, I would consideration, discussion, and possible action to ratify the nomination of the appointment of Lori Gallion as the city's appointee to the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency Advisory Committee for a 2-year term, and to modify the council's commission appointment rules by a 2/3 vote to waive the requirement that the mayor has to have a council member interview with him or her from the city manager recommendation. And I think I'm turning this over to our city manager.
All right, thank you, Mayor Agramonte and Council. As the mayor just said, this is for an appointment to the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Advisory Committee. And as part of the appointment process the council just reviewed, the way the process works now is that the mayor basically selects another council member to help do the interviews, and then the mayor makes a nomination, and that nomination is ratified by the council. In this instance, we had a switch in mayors before we were able to finish this process. Councilmember Hunley and Councilmember Cook had talked a little bit about the prior candidates, and in abundance of caution, we just kind of said, let's not include the two of them. Unclear about kind of the amount of conversation there was, but there, and then we also had Councilmember Edwards was out of town, and then Mayor Pro Tem Harrington was going to assist, but then had a calendar issue that came up. So Mayor Agramonte moved forward and did the interviews last Friday. Part of the reason staff wanted to try to move this forward is there's been 2 advisory commission meetings already. And so I think it's important that as a city we have representation. And so the process here is that the council, again, the mayor, when I return, will outline her rationale for her nominee in this point, which is Lori Gallion, and the reasons for the nomination. Council will have any questions and then go out to public comment. And then we'll come back to council. The mayor then would nominate make an official nomination, she'll be looking for a second. If you concur, then there's a ratification. If you don't concur, then you would come back to the mayor, and she would then move forward her number 2 candidate that she would like to recommend. This is a little different than what we've done in the past. When we had a situation like this previously, we came back at a second meeting. But part of the process you did this round is if there isn't a ratification by the full council on the mayor's nomination, then we will kind of keep moving through until maybe if we're unable to get to agreement, then the mayor, we would go back out and solicit new applicants. So again, that just would be the full process if it would be necessary. So with that, I'll turn it back to Mayor Agramonte.
Thank you, and thank you, I appreciate, I asked you to explain that for me because I would have preferred to have someone, do this job with me, but it just didn't, it was just, everything happened at once, and so I just want the public to know that it's not my preference that we did this way.
Mayor Agramonte, and so the first step we should do at this point would be suspend the rules that you have 2 people, that you would have a second person interview with you. So if we suspend the rules, then we can move forward through the nomination process. If council doesn't want to suspend the rules, then we would need to carry this over. And so with that, I think the first question would be, we're looking for a motion to suspend the rules.
When is the public comment?
Okay, so we would do public comment on the suspending the rules, it sounds like first, excuse me. We'll take them, and the application, and then we'll go, then we'll come back.
So there are no more comments or questions, so I'm turning it to the public. Okay, I'd like to open this to the public. Well, having no comments or questions, I will bring it back to the city council.
I'll make a motion to suspend the rule requiring that the mayor interview with one other person for this position.
Second.
May I have a roll call, please?
Cook.
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards.
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrington.
Aye.
Councilmember Hunley.
No.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you.
I would just like to explain my vote really quick. I don't believe that David Cook and I had discussed these individuals, and I couldn't do the interview because I got a call the day before the interviews. So that is why it ended up the way that it was.
And I'd like to explain why my vote is no, is that I received it with our packet, the applications, which there's some interesting folks in those applications, but I got a call the day before as well. And I got actually a call from 2 or 3 different people at City Hall, and I found that to be strange. And so I think that, I don't think suspending the rules is the right way to go. Thank you.
So is that a suggestion that we need to pay more attention how this is handled, how the council members are reached?
Well, I guess my point is that Mr. Cook is on the GSA, and I don't know how many meetings, how many of the important issues have come up in the 2 meetings that they've had, and I just find it that we need to bring a wider pool of talent into opportunities for people to serve. That's all.
I guess I would say, so the background of what happened is I was teaching a seminar, but I wrote the wrong day on my calendar that I was teaching, and so at the last minute I realized it was Friday and not Thursday as I had thought. But if council members Edwards and Hundley feel that the interview should be conducted with 2 members, I'm in somewhat of an imposition of these people to be re-interviewed, but I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I mean, it was my fault. I wrote the date down wrong on my calendar, and it couldn't be rescheduled at the last minute, so.
And I disagree with Hunley. I believe that my discussions with Mayor Hunley at that point, not picking anyone on that would be a violation of the Brown Act if I would have acted with the new mayor, Agramonte. So that's why I recused myself. And as a council member, I feel that I have that right, and I use that right. But I do want to caution this council that I do sit on the GSA, and my biggest concern is that we are really behind with the, with this process. Most of the other jurisdictions made this decision back in August, and I believe because of the fire and a few other issues. But for me to feel comfortable, I would love to have that position filled as quickly as possible, and it's up to Councilmember Harrington if she wants to change her vote or not to proceed.
So could I just add one thing? Would you mind if I add? We are the only city that's not represented on this advisory committee. This is, or it's only jurisdiction.
Their jurisdiction.
Right, the only jurisdiction, and it's an empty spot, and it's been that way. I don't know what the delay was. I don't know the exact reasons, but that's why we're here right now.
Is it permissible to redo the roll call vote?
Yes. Hello. The person in the majority can move to reconsider, and then that particular vote requires a regular 3-2 vote to pass to reconsider. So a person in the majority of that particular vote.
So you vote to reconsider and then you revote?
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to reconsider the pass vote on suspending the rules.
Is there a second?
Does it have to be majority voter?
Majority has to vote to revote.
I'll
It's an-
second.
It's an interesting
We're a
question.
minority vote. I don't know if we can second these
Oh,
things.
you can second. You can second.
Oh, okay. I'll let you.
So are we looking for a second from one of us three?
No, we have a second from one of the minority, and that's sufficient.
So now,
Is the council clear it takes a 2/3 vote to approve this suspension of the rules? Is that clear to everybody?
But we're doing step one, we voted to suspend the rules.
And
then
that
we
was
had
unsuccessful.
It was successful, but then we had discussion about it, and now I've been persuaded by the discussion to change my vote to not suspend the rules. So the first vote is on, do we want to have another vote?
Well, actually, the motion was not successful. It requires 4 votes to suspend the rules.
All right, well, now it's clear. Okay.
So the rules have not been suspended.
So I have a question for legal. Our agenda does not state that.
Yes. It actually does.
It,
Where?
I guess it does say 2/3.
But it doesn't say,
it doesn't say 4/5, right?
Where are we? Yes, yeah, it does. It's
Where?
the 5th line in the agenda, under 6.1.
By a 2/3 vote?
2/3 vote. 2/3 equals 4. You round up. You round up. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to do this again. All righty, well, that's why I wanted everyone to know that I was alone in this, and I did the best I could. So I'm sorry that it ended up like that.
I apologize.
All right, so so the outcome of this, just to be, to be clear, is what we will be doing is we will reschedule the interviews with Mayor Agramonte and Council and Mayor Pro Tem Harrington. We'll reschedule the interviews, and then we'll bring this back, and the earliest we can bring it back will be January 17th, which I believe is after the next GSA Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks for your help, and thank you very much for clearing this up. So I guess no appointment today. Okay, so we're on to, are we going on to 6.2? Is that?
Yes,
okay,
moving on to
thank you.
6.2, thank you.
All right, thanks. Oh, I'm just sitting here like, let's see. 6.2, approve the notice of completion, the NOC, for the West Napa Street Water System Replacement Project, number 1303, constructed by Anvil Builders, Inc., authorize the city manager to sign the NOC and direct the city clerk to file the NOC at the County of Sonoma Recorder's Office Public Works Director. Okay, thank you.
Mayor Agramonte, council members, I'm so delighted to bring this item to council tonight. When I took on the job of Public Works Director, several people told me that could be a short-lived assignment because they've got this West Napa Street project under construction, and if it doesn't go well, your job may not last long. And so I'm so glad that the project did go well. It's done, and we're ready to bring the notice of completion. I'm also delighted to work with Catherine Wall, who many of you have seen at council meetings, but apparently have not had the pleasure of hearing a presentation from Kat. She's our project manager. She's had a huge role in this project and every project with the city, and so she will be presenting this item to council tonight.
Thank you very much, Public Works Director Ferguson. Good evening, Mayor Agramonte and council members and members of the public. My name is, as Colleen mentioned, my name is Catherine Wall, and I'm the Public Works Project Manager with the City of Sonoma. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present on our city's West Napa Street Water System Replacement Project. I would like to go ahead and start off with giving a brief summary of the project and why it was needed, and then I will proceed with a project status update. I'll draw your attention to the PowerPoint presentation. This project, as we have seen happening throughout the last several months, occurred along West Napa Street and extended from, no pointer, but as you can see, extended from around the plaza at Broadway all the way to Sonoma Highway, down West Napa Street. And prior to the project improvements, the city's existing water system in the project area included an asbestos cement water pipe that was installed in the 1950s and blue polybutylene water services. And because this is aging water infrastructure and not as reliable, the system was not, or was at risk for unscheduled water shutdowns. Ultimately, the main objectives of the project included replacing this aging water infrastructure that was already failing and had a higher potential of failing. Improving water conservation due to leak reduction. Improving fire safety by adding fire hydrants. And minimizing the risk of unplanned water shutdowns. There was also a goal of completing this project prior to the California Department of Transportation, or Caltrans, paving project that would include, or that will include, the West Napa Street. It's expected to be constructed in about 2019-2020. On February 22nd, 2017, the City Council awarded the project construction contract to Anvil Builders. And Anvil started construction on May 30th, 2017. And you can see some construction photos in the presentation in front of you. During construction, the project objectives were achieved by replacing 2,820 feet of new 8 to 10 inch water main, as well as 58 new water services. Continuing with some of the project achievements, we also included in this project 12 fire hydrants that were installed, and 6 new and 6 improved. And by making these improvements, the city has successfully reduced the likelihood of leaks and unplanned water shutdowns. So moving on to the project status. So in the staff report, we had that it was expected to be completed as of today, December 18th. And it was so close to being complete. It's almost there. It has 2 final punch list items that are very minor, including the back of sidewalk surface restoration, which is very minor, and just some making sure that the back of sidewalk is restored where work was done. And 5 water service operating extensions. So, as you have in front of you, I'll just draw the attention to the revised recommendation from staff for the to reflect this development essentially, and we can talk about that after this presentation. So the final project cost was $2,320,965.42, which is approximately $525,000 under the authorized contract amount by City Council. The contractor did not use any of the contingency approved for the project, which is why it's so far under. And the project was finished under budget despite increased scope items due to the reduced level of effort required during potholing and the treatment of contaminated water and other minor construction items. So I would like to draw a little bit of attention to the project team that was involved with this project. In addition to city staff, including myself, Public Works Director, and City Engineer Ferguson, and Steve McCarthy, who's our Public Works Water Division Supervisor, as well as a few others. So in addition to the city staff, we also had GHD Inc., which was the consultant hired to do construction management inspection and also designed the project. And all three, Jane Rosga, our construction manager, Matt Wargla, our design engineer, and Eric Leitz, our construction inspector, is in our audience this evening. Do a little wave. There they are. So thank you so much for joining us. And as well, joining us is representative, the project manager from Anvil Builders, Caleb McWaters. You can do a little wave, Caleb. There he is. So they did a wonderful job on this project, assisting city staff, and obviously the contractor has done a great job in providing a successful project completion. It's almost there. We just have the final couple of little minor things that will be completed this week. That are expected to be completed this week. So, that being said, we have a fun opportunity here if the City Council were to proceed approving this note of completion as stated in the attachment that you just received, conditional upon full completion, as determined by the city engineer. So we, now that we are getting champagne glasses full of city water, we have a photograph opportunity for City Council celebrating this project completion, were it to proceed with this approval of notice of completion. So, and we also have a poster board here that Jane has that shows some of the project's specifics, and that we can take a picture with. But please, I'll pass it along to you to do an action on this item. As
Well, here.
Oh, action first and then toast, probably. I'll pass it along to the city manager. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to thank the hard work of our public works staff. This has been a big project, including construction inspectors and folks out looking at things, and our water team. So thanks to Kat and Colleen. We can do a toast and a picture at the end rather than taking you all out on the site, which is a little cold this time of year. We thought we would do it this way. But let's move through the process, and then we can hopefully take a picture.
So are there any comments or questions from the city council? Okay.
This is a pretty big project. When's the last time we did a project this big? Do you know? It's probably a while ago. Not in recent memorable history, that's what I thought.
This is certainly one of our big projects that's been in the making since about 2013 or so, maybe even a little bit before that. It was mostly during Dan Takasugi's tenure as Public Works Director.
Nothing else. So I'd like to take it out to the public for comments. Having none. Sorry, Mr. Metzger. Metzler. I'm going to have to
I just had a quick question. Issues have come before the council, the Community Services and Environment Commission, regarding bicycle improvements, and we've been told repeatedly we can't do things on Highway 12 because it's Caltrans jurisdiction. And I'm just curious, I would like to have some explanation about, this is Highway 12, so why is it a city issue, you know, when other city issues that have come up with Highway 12, we've been told, no, we couldn't do that because it's Caltrans.
Thank you.
I can address that one. Highway 12 is Caltrans right-of-way. We have approval from Caltrans through an easement to have our water system in their right-of-way. And before we can work on our water system, we have to get an encroachment permit from Caltrans. In this case, the encroachment permit said that we had to do all of our work at night, which is what we did. And it is their right-of-way, and we have to comply with the Caltrans requirements when we or anyone else does work there. And as an example, on the other side, we have city streets, our city right-of-way, and we don't operate the sanitary sewer system. The sanitation district does. They have rights to be in our streets, but when they work on their sewer, they have to get an encroachment permit from the city.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the public? Having none, I'm going to bring it back to the City Council for your input and further direction. I'd certainly like to, yes.
I would like to make a motion to approve the notice of completion for the West Napa Water Street Water System Replacement Project number 1303, constructed by Anvil Builders, Inc., and authorize the city manager to sign the notice of completion and direct the city clerk to file the notice of completion at the County of Sonoma Recorder's Office.
Second.
And Mayor Hunley and the seconder, can I just add one item there?
I'm a
that-
council member.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Hunley, I'm still getting used to that as well. Under the approve the notice of completion, if we could add conditional upon full completion of the work as determined by the city engineer. Again, these are very small items. So if the mayor and seconder would be,
So amended.
okay, thank you.
Fine.
So roll call, please.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrington,
Aye.
Councilmember Hunley,
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte.
Aye.
Thank you.
I think this is an important moment, and we need to memorialize it somehow. So you may direct that.
So if council could come down off the dais, and we'll have the members of the team come forward and take a few pictures. Thank you.
And to restate, our construction manager, Jane Rosga, is here with a board for you guys. GHD made this board.
Please join, yeah. Have the team come in, please.
He's been here, he's done this, he knows.
You guys are gonna have to get closer. You guys have to get closer. There we go. 1, 2, 3.
Money.
Water. There you go. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Putting up with us.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you, Kat.
I'd like to add my thanks to the whole, to the council, to the project team, and to the community. This has been a long project at night, keeping people awake, and I really appreciate everyone's patience in getting to the point where we can keep the water flowing. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. So I also wanted this record to include that that was water. I made a statement here on the video that it was water, so I just wanted to move forward with that announcement. Thank you so much. Now on to 6.23. It is? Oh, yes. 6.3, discussion, consideration, and possible action to adopt a resolution accepting a Habitat Conservation Fund grant in the amount of $55,113 for Sonoma Overlook Phase 1. Thank you.
So Mayor Agramonte and council, thank you. I think this is another exciting and a good news item in front of you tonight. And I'll turn over to Colleen Ferguson to walk through this. At a very high level, we have a community group that we've been working in partnership to bring funds to improve the Sonoma Overlook Trail. And I think that's one of the things that Sonoma does well, is working with different volunteer groups to make things happen. And this is another example of that. And there are some minor additions that we need direction approval from council in order to move forward. So with that, I'll turn it to Colleen.
Thank you, City Manager. Again, Mayor Agramonte and council members, I know you're all familiar with the Sonoma Overlook Trail. It's a nearly 3-mile walking path set into the hillside backdrop above the city of Sonoma. It's described on the Sonoma Ecology Center's webpage as a diverse array of native plants and animals grace the gentle grade trail, and spectacular views of the town of Sonoma, the Sonoma Valley, and the Bay Area can be found in the meadow at its top. I've certainly enjoyed hiking there myself. The trail was constructed in 1999. It's really an amazing partnership between the city, the Sonoma Overlook Trail Stewards, and the Sonoma Ecology Center. The planning, design, and maintenance of the trail has relied heavily on the volunteer efforts led by the Sonoma Overlook Trail Stewards, who do their work under the nonprofit umbrella of the Sonoma Ecology Center. And here they are, the happy group of trail stewards. They are an all-volunteer group, and they recently noticed that the trail was becoming degraded. And so they worked with a well-respected trail designer to identify solutions to address badly eroding sections of the trail. Back when the trail was first built, the first year, it had about 5,000 hikers. This last year, it had about 55,000 hikers, so it's getting a lot of use. These numbers are based on trail user census days that they do. The trail has experienced erosion. It shows exposed bedrock and has reaches with unsure footing and safety concerns. There were some bulldozer trails from the firefighting activities that also impacted the trail area. So they identified a need to reroute and rehabilitate the trail, and really defined it as a trail improvement project with a goal to have a safer and more sustainable trail. The trail would be rerouted in one section. A lot of the trail would be rehabilitated. The project's now ready to move to construction beginning in April of next year. And it would be a 12-week duration construction project, and now we can talk about details. So at the beginning part of the trail, steps would be added. It's steep enough there that steps are needed. A section of the trail would be removed, but not removed as in no one can hike there. It would just be removed because a different route that's better has been identified. And it's a little hard to see on this graphic. Is there a pointer here? No, the pointer. Well, okay. Anyways, there's a little red line on the graphic you can see is where the new trail would be. And there's an older area of trail that would be not used as a trail anymore because there would be a new trail route constructed. Other reaches of the trail would be, stay where they are, but they would be rehabilitated. So if you're thinking that this sounds like a very needed project and like a lot of work, you're right. So the trail stewards just didn't identify the need for the project. They went beyond that to find the resources to build the project. And one of the resources they found, or an opportunity, was a habitat conservation grant through state parks. The grant will not allow the trail stewards to apply for it directly. It required a public agency like the city to apply for the grant. So we worked in partnership, and in October of 2016, the city council took an action to approve the city applying for the grant, which we did. And in June of 2017, we were notified that we were successful, that the State Parks Habitat Conservation Fund would fund a grant in the amount of $55,113 for the Sonoma Overlook Trail project. The grant like all grants, requires grant administration. And a project like this, of course, requires project oversight. And so the staff is proposing to work with Sonoma Ecology Center for that grant administration and project oversight. The Ecology Center has a lot of experience administering grants and could do a great job, as they already have a relationship with the trail stewards on the property. The grant does require that a deed restriction be placed in the area of the project. The granting agency doesn't want to put funds into a property and then have that property change uses, be sold, something like that. They want their investment to last for a while. So the grant does require a deed restriction in the area that the work is done. The deed restriction would have a 20-year duration. It wouldn't apply to the entire property. There was an Exhibit A attached to the staff report that actually described the whole property that the city owns there. So I need to ask council to disregard that Exhibit A, that it would not be the area covered by the deed restriction. I've talked to someone at State Parks and about the intent of the deed restriction, how it would actually apply in this case, and we'll work together on the language of the deed restriction to just cover the portion of the property that has the Sonoma Overlook Trail. So overall, this project is much bigger than the Habitat Conservation Fund grant amount. The trail stewards have done an amazing job fundraising. Between the $55,000 more or less from this grant, they've raised all the additional funds needed to accumulate $204,000 worth of resources to build this project. So the council action is to accept the grant, to direct staff to implement this deed restriction when we have the language all worked out for the appropriate area to cover by the deed restriction, to waive the encroachment permit fees that the city would charge for work on city property normally. The prior council resolution approving application for the grant did a broad delegation of authority to the city manager. So now that the project is back in front of council, just are asking council to confirm that delegation of authority. This is a new project. This project was not in the CIP this year, so council would need to add this project to this year's CIP so we can go forward with the project. And then we need to amend the budget to have enough to cover the grant, because we'll do the work and then we'll build the granting agency and then can replenish the city coffers, but we have to spend the money first. And then also appropriate enough funds to hire the Sonoma Ecology Center to do the project oversight and grant administration. And here's a photo from just a couple weeks ago where there was a birthday celebration for Sonoma Overlook Trail. So that's a good place to close, and I'm here to answer any questions. And Joanna from the Sonoma Overlook Trail Stewards. Where's Joanna?
I didn't see her. Oh.
Well, she was here when I came in. Oh. Oh, okay. She's short. Oh, yes, she's here to answer questions as well.
Are there any questions from the city council or comments?
So Colleen, what are the restrictions on the Upper Mountain Cemetery property? Now, isn't it in fact protected forever up there as open space?
It is currently zoned open space, and it has an open space overlay. So it's currently zoned public facilities, but it has a open space overlay, and it is not, is my understanding from talking with planning staff, it's not permanently protected, but it is protected in terms of our zoning and our general plan categories. That is.
So it sounds like we need to change that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jim.
So the language of the final deed restriction, which I was also surprised, I just assumed, I was here when Montini came in and that's all protected and locked up. I didn't realize Overlook is just locked up because we zoned it that way, but technically we could change it at this point.
And as I understand it, and from looking at the deeds and such, the city has owned that property for a long, long time. And we have the mountain cemetery on the lower part of the property. We have a water tank on the property, but it's just been a city-owned property. I don't remember when we first got the property, but a long time.
Here we go.
And recall the Montini property, we purchased that from the Open Space District.
Right,
And
yeah.
it had 30 or 40 pages of conditions that it required us to agree to acquire it.
So the final language of this deed restriction, which to me seems like a very serious thing, it's, can't change it for a very long time. As far as assurances that, I read in the staff report that we'll still be able to maintain the cemetery and the tanks, but as far as like not exactly losing what we have now, but sort of keeping what we're doing now, this is just to keep us, in case something changed and a future city council wanted to sell the property, this is just saying that nobody can make it not a trail for at least 20 years.
Well, we had a city council at one time that wanted to put a 192-room hotel up there.
I
so,
remember, which is why I was surprised that there wasn't an easement on it, but, so the extent of sort of what we're locking down is just what we have now. It's a trail, public use, and that's what we're gonna have for 20 years.
Yeah, so again, as Colleen said, because this is a large parcel, it does have multiple uses. We want to make sure that that deed restriction is clear, that is around the trail area, and that is for the park area, and that we will, so that we can maintain our ability for the rest of the parcel. But it would be for the portion that is used for the trail, it would be locking down that is to be continue to be used for a trail in public space, which has seemed to be, in terms of the intention of recent councils and where we are currently, seems to be in alignment. So it seemed, from a staff perspective, something that we could make sure we don't lose anything in terms of the bottom part of the parcel, but putting some additional restrictions on the top part. It definitely is a serious piece, which is we wanted to make sure it was clear to council.
But that's not what we're doing right now.
You would be giving us authority, go ahead, Colleen, you would be giving us authority, because, so part of the timing on this grant has got to be accepted by the end of December. In order to accept the grant, you have to agree that you're going to do the deed restriction. So that is why, and we can't get the specific language on the deed restriction until you put in kind of the contract. So what we've done is we've had conversations within the grant application. There was some language, and so we've had conversations with staff, but with state staff. But we would need kind of some policy comfort and policy direction of how you would like to see this, and then we would move forward in that direction. If for some reason we couldn't get that, or if, and maybe this could be something, I've seen this done in the past, where you give policy direction and that both the city attorney and city manager have to agree that as the deed restriction gets written, that it meets the intent, so you've got kind of a double set of eyes. That is a way to do it. If it felt kind of outside of a boundary and we needed to come back, then we may need to come back and do a special meeting with the council before the end of the year, or we're unable to take the funding. But this is kind of we're in this place with the state that we wanted to try to bring it forward and preserve the funding, and yet there's a little bit of kind of elasticity, or at least policy direction, that we're going to need here.
And I can share the language that the State Parks Habitat Conservation Grant staff has in the application and in the letter specifically that we received when we were notified of the grant. It says the deed restriction ensures that the property is used for a purpose consistent with the grant scope, so in this case trail rehabilitation, for the length of the contract performance period, which in our case is 20 years.
Are there any comments or questions? Any more?
I have another question. So as far as our authority to make rules for the trail, hours, all of the logistical things to go with it, so is this giving any other entity the authority to make rules on this? Or is it just saying that the things that we're not allowed to do, which is to make it not a trail, but as far as the rules as to what can be on the trail, what hours, it's not being taken away from us?
No. It just, we need to continue to operate it as a publicly accessible trail.
Got it.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Having none, I'd like to take it out to the public for any comments. Having none, I bring it back to the city council for input and further direction.
Um,
Well, we have a resolution, right?
Yeah. I was just going to say that I run the Overlook Trail and the Montini Trail every week, and it's such a gem. So to all the stewards, thank you so much for everything you do. It's incredible to walk out your door and have that right there. But I don't know if people have other comments, but I was going to make a motion to approve item 6.3, accept a Habitat Conservation Fund grant in the amount of $55,113 for the Sonoma Overlook Trail Phase 1, accepting and implementing a 20-year deed restriction, confirming prior delegation of implementation authority to the city manager, waiving city encroachment permit fees for the project, and amending fiscal year 2018 capital improvement program to add the Sonoma Overlook Trail reroute and rehabilitation project in the amount of $72,733, and authorizing the 2017-2018 budget amendment of $72,733 from the General Fund Reserve Special Projects Funds to Public Works Department GL account. Is that
You don't need to read it. Is that,
Second.
a second? Could I have roll call, please?
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye,
Thank you.
and that concludes. Thank you so much. Could I ask for the volunteers to please stand from the Overlook Trail? Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for all your hard work. Now on to 6.4, discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding a request by Mayor Pro Tem Harrington to hold a study session to discuss review of the city's living wage ordinance, report on Council 2014 direction regarding minimum wage study, 3, issuing an RFP to hire a consultant to study that. I'd like to turn this over to the city manager.
Mayor Agramonte, Council. As you are aware, you have a resolution and a policy that outlines how you can add new items to the city's work plan and adding things to the agenda. And so the process is that a council member submits a request to the city manager, and then it gets scheduled on an agenda. And so Councilmember Harrington requested to agendize a study session on the following items. 1, a review of the city's living wage ordinance. 2, a report on the prior 2014 council direction regarding exploring an establishment of an increase in the minimum wage law in the city of Sonoma, and exploration of a local citywide minimum wage. And there were some documents that Mayor Pro Tem Harrington also requested, and per the policy, those were attached to the staff report as well. And there is some additional information within the staff report that I'm happy to answer questions on, but there's some background about the city's living wage ordinance, a little bit of discussion in the minutes from back in 2014, and some information about the state minimum wage law as well. And so with that, I will turn over to Mayor Pro Tem Harrington for her comments. The only question I would ask is if the council does decide to move forward, I would like to maybe speak a little bit about timing of that work study session. So with that, I'll turn it to Mayor Pro Tem Harrington.
Thank you. And I have a fever, so this will be a feverish delivery here. But one of the reasons I think that we have to consider raising the minimum wage in the city of Sonoma now is that we're in this discussion about, we're sort of like nonplussed about why people can't afford housing. And when we go through all of the factors, people are always talking about supply and demand. But another critical factor of the reason why people cannot afford housing is because people are making $10 an hour. And so I thought to myself, what can you get in the town of Sonoma for $10? It's actually less after you pay your taxes, but you can get maybe a third of a pepperoni pizza. You know, if you're lucky, you can get a hamburger and a Coke. So when somebody is making a third of a pepperoni pizza an hour, it's not shocking that they can't afford rent. And I think that all of the other, as the cost of living has increased in the Bay Area. It has come to Sonoma. It's incredibly expensive to rent here, to eat here. We all know that healthcare is really expensive. But one of the things that we can do, we're not in charge of building, units. That's not something that we're not going to go out and build apartment buildings, although we can participate in that in some way. One of the most concrete things we can do is raise the minimum wage in the city of Sonoma. And it's hardly a novel idea. It's happened all over the Bay Area. And I attached the study here just so you could see the type of study that we could get. That was the effect of a $15 minimum wage in San Jose and Santa Clara County, just so you could understand the type of data we could get. And I think two important things to consider are, if we are committed to having a tourism economy, that we should, as a value statement, say that we only want to have good jobs, that we don't want to have a tourist economy that has people cleaning rooms for $10 an hour and driving 2 hours each way to their families, because that is wrong. That's wrong, and we don't have to stand for it, and we can do our part. And maybe we won't get to the highest living wage necessary, but it's something we can do to fulfill our duties, I think, as stewards of this community. So I care very passionately about this. I'd like to discuss it. I think we should revisit the living wage and make sure that it's being enforced. But I think that to have a discussion about why people can't afford to live here and not talk about wages when the minimum wage is $10 an hour is missing a whole piece of that discussion that we really should have if we're committed to having any kind of equality and justice, economic justice here in Sonoma.
Are there any other comments? Please, if you're used to being here, this is the way we do it. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So no questions, and I'd like to take it out to the public for your comments.
My name is Norma Barnett, 637 Fifth Street East. I'm a member of the Sonoma Valley Housing Group as a representative from the Congregational Church and their Social Action Committee. Both of those, the housing group and also the Congregational Church, are partners with the North Bay Organizing Project. We're actively addressing issues, as Shelley mentioned earlier, of rent stabilization, just cause eviction, and of course always consideration of affordable housing, as well as what's happening with this developmental center and all of the previous housing issues that have come up, and also since the fire. And I'm just going to repeat what Amy has said so eloquently, is it is impossible to talk about housing issues and the major problems that are created for people who are not pretty wealthy in this community at this time without addressing issues of income inequality, and particularly taking seriously what we can do about living wages. So thank you for bringing this forward. Absolutely, you should be discussing it and agendizing it. Thank you.
Will Schonbrunn, Boys Springs. Let me start with a few numbers. Between 2010 and 2014, an average of 12.3% of the county's population were below the poverty line. During the previous 5-year period, between 2005 and 2009, an average of 9.6% of county residents lived in poverty. The shift represents an increase of almost 30% for that share of the county's poorest residents. Breakdown of that: 1 in 9 people in Sonoma County, or 55,638 residents, were living at or below the federal poverty level last year, which was $19,790 a year for a family of 3 and $23,850 for a family of 4. So a little bit of history. With the passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act, the U.S. minimum wage was initially set at 25 cents an hour for covered workers. Since then, it has been raised 22 times, most recently in 2009 to $7.25 an hour federal minimum wage. Maybe it's a whopping $7.50 by now. Then, as now, the business community, corporations, Chamber of Commerce, employers in general, vehemently fought the institution of a minimum wage, claiming it would destroy the U.S. economy and create more unemployment, lost jobs. It never happened. In fact, just the opposite occurred. Incredibly, the same arguments are used every time a minimum wage increase is attempted, and you'll hear it again. Seeing as how the issue of a minimum wage has been debated for almost 80 years now, what new could possibly be added to the discussion that has not already been hashed over ad nauseum? We know unequivocally that increased wage income for local workers is spent locally and aids all forms of business, from retail to professional to nonprofits and services. We know unequivocally that jobs are not lost or diminished, but quite the opposite happens, and local economies improve. In my view, the only thing about the minimum wage issue that's arguable is what that rate of pay should be. That should be the discussion and debate for this city council and the people of Sonoma, and it should take place at the earliest city council agenda possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Will. Oh, that's right. I read his name all the time. Sean Brunton.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Jerry Bernhout. I'm a 40-year resident of Sonoma Valley, currently living in Oakmont. I'm an environmental attorney, and I echo the comments of the excellent comments of Councilwoman Harrington and of Mr. Schoenbrunn. And I'll just add the environmental aspect, that obviously a jobs housing improvement in the jobs housing balance is obviously going to mean an improvement in traffic, less energy expended by people getting here, and less greenhouse gas emissions, etc. It's obvious that the discussion is timely and appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to let you know when the yellow light goes on, you have about 30 seconds more.
Great. Good evening. My name is Mark Maloof of 19255 Junipero Serra Drive. I'm a student and the youngest member of our Sonoma County Democratic Party Central Committee. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you all for being here, and especially to Amy Harrington for giving us the opportunity to discuss an issue that is so often overlooked, which is the issue of wage inequality in our city. While the cost of living increases and rents continue to skyrocket, wages for working families remain stagnant or are in decline. According to statistics from the California Housing Partnership, Sonoma County median renters have seen a decline in wages of 6% from the year 2000 to 2015 when adjusted to inflation. In the same time period, the county's median rent has skyrocketed by over 15%. This has resulted in a net decline in the purchasing power of the working poor and median renters, who make up a third of our county's population, of over $5,000 according to U.S. Census data. And yet, despite our Board of Supervisors taking the right step by passing the living wage ordinance, the extensive changes made to the adopted legislation falls short of what is desperately needed. Unless this issue is addressed, working poverty among our residents will continue to proliferate. According to data from the California Budget and Policy Project, it is estimated that in Sonoma County, a living wage for two parents working full-time to support two children is $22 an hour, including costs for food, housing, transportation, childcare, and health care, without relying on public safety net programs. This means that the current state minimum wage of $10 is nothing short of a starvation wage that is less than half of a living or self-sufficiency income. Raising the minimum wage for the city of Sonoma would be the most effective method to address working poverty, and we would not be the first ones to do so. Since 2014, cities from Seattle to Los Angeles have enacted a $50 minimum wage laws that cover all low-wage workers. In fact, Santa Clara County took the lead by implementing the highest and most comprehensive living wage law ever at $19 an hour, and I advise this body to follow suit. The working people of our city and county cannot afford to wait around for the federal government or even our state legislators to enact the wage reform that is so desperately needed. It is time for our city council to stand with the working families of our city instead of the Sonoma Chamber of Commerce, and to take the initiative by enacting a robust and comprehensive minimum wage increase for all workers in our city, both public and private, of no less than $15 an hour. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maloof.
The Reverend Norman Cram, 215 Napa Street East. For 55 years, I have served as a clergy person of the Episcopal Church, including 30 years as a Navy chaplain. A few years ago, a parish hall was named for me. My seminary assumed that to have such an honor, I had died. The upside of this mistake is that the seminary no longer asks me for money. In the next 2.5 minutes, I'm going to answer the question, what religious axiom embraced by all faith groups justifies a living wage? And second, answer the question, what does working with the Trump administration have in common with playing chess with a pigeon? First, what religious axiom embraced by all faith groups justifies a living wage? It's the golden rule, found in every piece of literature of every faith group, to do unto others as you would want them to do unto us. If you or I busted our tushies for 8 hours a day, cleaning school bathrooms and picking up mud and barf from a locker room, we would want to make enough of a wage to support our families. If you or I cared for elderly people dressing, cleaning, and feeding them day after day in a smelly, poorly vented bedroom, we would want to make enough of a wage to support our families. If you or I mowed grass, pruned bushes, and hedged lawns in the hot sun or cold of winter, we would want to make enough of a wage to support our families. The point is, the spiritual community has a simple directive of compassion, empathy, and love to direct its support of a living wage. And that directive is the golden rule. Second, how is working with the Trump administration similar to playing chess with a pigeon? The answer is, when the chess match is over, the pigeon knocks over all the pieces, defecates on the board, and then struts around like it's won. How much better I look forward to working with this council than with a pigeon.
Thank you, Reverend Cram.
All right. Logan Harvey, 578 Estebadera Drive. So I just want to point out to start that in a recent article I read written by the the Press Democrat, they pointed out that Reality Track had listed Sonoma County as one of the top 10 least affordable places to live. And this was done in 2016. This article came out July 4th, 2016. So we're in the company of New York City, San Francisco, and many other cities that are completely unaffordable for people to live in. Reasons being, we all know them, right? It's a desirable place to live. It's tough to build here. There are certain building restrictions and geography that prevent places to live to be built, and jobs that are plentiful don't pay enough for people to live here. In fact, the same study suggested that an average wage worker would have to pay 57% of their income in order to live in this town. And it's an interesting thing, wages. They're always discussed, when we talk about the minimum wage, a lot of times people think of some high school student that's just making money for fun and not supporting a family, and that's just not the reality of what minimum wage really represents. And wages in general They're a contract between you to give up your hours alive on this earth, doing something that maybe you don't want to do, especially in a low-wage job, in order to exist in society. And when we have a society like ours has a public safety net that's so completely in shambles, you don't really have a choice to just get another job. You have to take a job. You don't really have a choice to move because you don't have, $3,000-4,000 laying around in order to pay for that down payment, first and last month's rent in another city. You have to adjust the wages that are here. And with the service industry that we have, that's the basis of our economy, low-wage jobs, or what we would consider unskilled labor, although being somebody who's worked in the service industry for a long time, I can tell you that it takes a lot of skill to deal with people on a regular basis. These are jobs that are often paid at the minimum wage. And you have the opportunity here as a city council to give your citizens a raise. You have the opportunity to give them a life of dignity. You have an opportunity to say that your life, that you're trading with your labor, your hours awake are worth something. And if you're going to work 40 hours a week, 52.14 weeks a year, you deserve a place to live, food in your belly, and somewhere and a safe place to sleep. I guess it's a place to live too. I took a little time to study, and within 25 miles, the cheapest apartment that I could find was in Vallejo. It was a 300 square foot apartment, and it was $970 a month. And that would require for 30% of the income to be paying for that wage, which is the standard, right? Affordable housing is 30% of your wage. That would require at least $18 an hour. And then you're driving from Vallejo. So asking over $20 is not unreasonable.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey.
Good evening, Mayor Agramonte and council members. I'm Georgia Kelly on Mitchell Way in Sonoma. And I want to thank you, Amy, for bringing this measure up to the council. I wanted to talk a little about, I certainly support a study and a discussion to be done on increasing the minimum wage in the city of Sonoma, and to also consider a living wage, because these are two different things, as we've heard from other speakers too. So I think it's important to make a distinction between minimum and living. I guess a few meetings ago, we heard Shauna Davis talk about paying her employees $25 an hour, and her employees are able to live in Sonoma, so I assume that's a livable wage or a living wage. And I would like to see this study explore, not just talk about raising the minimum wage, but also explore what would a living wage be in this community, factoring in rent, insurance, other costs. How much would a person need to make to be able to live here? So that's what a living wage would mean. We've all experienced the killer commutes on Highway 37 and 101, and I think it's only going to get worse if people are going to continue to have to commute from far away to be able to work here and other communities in the county. So raising the minimum wage would help alleviate some of the traffic problems and the pollution resulting from them. One thing I did want to mention, because every year for 8 years I have led a group to the Mondragon cooperatives in Spain, and what they've created there, in the 1950s they had an unemployment rate of 70%. It was the most impoverished region of Spain. They've built a whole complex of worker-owned businesses in the region, and today it's the wealthiest area of Spain. 50 years later, it became the wealthiest area. Their pay ratio is 6 to 1, so a CEO of a major company would only make 6 times the lowest paid worker-owner. This probably sounds punitive to Americans, but for people whose aspirations are not great wealth but great community, great happiness, a great lifestyle, they have it all. They have no poverty, they have no slums, and they have no people living in the streets. So there are ways to look at being more equitable in the way we pay people in society. And I would certainly be happy to talk to any of you about that model, because I think it's so helpful to know that there are models that exist on this planet that don't require slave wages. So thank you.
Dave Ransom. I live in Santa Rosa. I go to church in Sonoma. I'm glad that Norman brought up the golden rule, because the backward way of saying that is he who has the gold makes the rules. And one of the nice things about this city is that it has local government that is approachable. And local government can do something different than that. He who has the gold makes the rules. You probably wonder why, since I'm not from Sonoma, I keep showing up at the city council meetings. Part of the reason is that I meet with folks who are in need and active about that at our church every Sunday. And a few Sundays ago, we realized that part of the reason that we couldn't get out on the street and do more was that so many people were working 2 or 3 jobs and had to budget time, they said, even to come to the Sunday meeting. I'm not in this situation, so I get to tell you all what I hear in those situations. And I also understand, because I drive over here all the time, that I can tell when the shifts change in this town because of the traffic coming either against me as I'm coming here, or that I'm stuck in going from Santa Rosa to Sonoma. So this is a very important step to take. I come out of the labor movement, and as a partial labor historian, I remember that, and I'm sure that your families were involved in this 150 years ago, and up until the 8-hour day was passed, that the slogan was 8 hours for work, 8 hours for sleep, 8 hours for what we will. And that what we will at the time was civic involvement. In order to be able to be active in your local government, you had to have time to do that. And anybody who's working 2 or 3 jobs doesn't have time to be an active citizen. So this is important to civic engagement as well as housing. We're not the first community in the Bay Area to deal with this, of course. Santa Clara passed a $15 an hour minimum wage July of this year. They were a little behind because San Jose, Cupertino, Los Gatos, Milpitas, and Palo Alto had all done that. Now, it's not immediately 15. They're working up to 15 in 2019. Mountain View and Sunnyvale, I think, are getting there by next year. And San Mateo had let off the way sometime earlier. So thank you very much. I hope you all will take this up. I look forward to being part of the discussion.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ransom?
My name is Lily Horan. I live at 578 Estamadera Drive. I like to echo David's words. I personally believe that this local government is very approachable. Thank you. And that's why I'm here. I support a livable wage in Sonoma, and I'd like to thank the city council member Amy Harrington for highlighting the importance of a living wage within the city of Sonoma. And I fully support a study to be conducted to review what a livable wage would be in the city of Sonoma. And I love the analogy of a pizza because it kind of highlights the seriousness of it. Many of my friends and I live in the city, well, I live in the city of Sonoma. I live with my mom because I can't afford rent. But many of my friends do commute here from Vallejo, Santa Rosa, and Napa, and often, we are looking on Craigslist and affordable housing, and I truly believe that if a study is conducted, we can find what a true livable wage, and I'm sure it's not as close to $15 an hour, but I hope we can raise the livable wage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Martin Bennett. I live at 19167A Robinson Road. I'm co-chair of North Bay Jobs with Justice, a community labor alliance of 20 unions and community-based organizations. North Bay Jobs with Justice evolved out of the Living Wage Coalition of Sonoma County that led campaigns to win approval for living wage ordinances in the city of Sebastopol in 2003, the city of Sonoma in 2004, and the city of Petaluma in 2006. Jobs with Justice then led a 2-year campaign to pass a $15 an hour living wage ordinance for the county of Sonoma in 2015 that raises wages for 1,200 workers for the county and county contractors. We are now lobbying the Santa Rosa City Council for a citywide minimum wage covering all workers in that city and would phase in by 2019, 4 years earlier than the state of California. We believe that all cities and the county should implement minimum wage laws in the North Bay, and this has already occurred in the city and county of San Francisco and is occurring in Santa Clara County, Los Angeles County, San Mateo County. Currently, 25 cities and counties have implemented minimum wage laws in California, and 38 have approved living wage laws. Many have both. We would have 3 recommendations for the council if you choose to move forward. First, would you commission a study about the fiscal impacts by the UC Berkeley Labor Center? Economists at the Labor Center are the acknowledged leading experts in the state on both citywide minimum wage and living wage laws. In 2004, the Labor Center prepared a report on the fiscal impacts of our proposed living wage law for the city of Sonoma. Second, we would urge that you work with our organization to develop a citywide minimum wage law that is comparable to what the city of Santa Rosa will likely consider. Experience elsewhere suggests that enforcement is much more effective if there is uniformity across cities in a county, including the phase-in length, other provisions in the minimum wage law. Lastly, affordable housing crisis has moved from extreme to insane. It must be addressed from multiple angles, and I applaud you for suggesting we have to raise the wage floor. But the magnitude of this crisis is so deep that we must move simultaneously to implement rent control, to implement a jobs housing commercial linkage fee, and raising the real estate transfer tax
Thank you,
to
Mr.
increase
Bennett.
funding for affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any? Metzler.
Ken Brown, 1396 Lubeck Street. As a renter here in the city of Sonoma, I want to thank Amy for putting this on the agenda.
It's always interesting to follow a sage. Richard Silver, 95 Bernhard. Be very brief. It's not only the issue of minimum wage and living wage, it's also purchase power. Were I to have made $10.50 an hour in the year 2000, whatever I chose to purchase with that $10.50 for each hour of my labor, in today's situation, 2017, to purchase the same goods or services, rent, food, an attorney, how many hours would I have to work to afford Mr. Walter's fee? Today I would have to earn $15.04 per hour in 2017 to buy the same goods and services that I only needed $10.50 in the year 2000. So in addition to the eloquence of all the other speakers who preceded me, something to consider in putting a study together is to say, we're already behind, and every 6 months or every year, in fact, every time the United States government consumer price index figures come out, they're going to be releasing December shortly. Those figures, by the way, that I gave you of the 43.2% increase in the inflation, adjusted for inflation rate, is from the United States government consumer price index of November 2017. So I'm pretty current. So I would encourage you all to amalgamate all that was said before me as follows. To follow the precepts of how fast you can phase in, but you begin your phase in at $15 an hour, which is really going back to the year 2000 at $10.50. So you're already 17 years behind. And that you increase your phase-ins accelerated, where you're going from 15 to 18 to 22 and beyond in a prescribed manner, so that if nothing else, individuals who made $10.50 an hour in the year 2000 can keep their nose at the water line. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Do I have any further comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the city council for which direction we're going in. So let's see. So do I have any direction from this council?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. I would support this. I think that it would be nice to have the study session. I think that it's something that needs to be reviewed. Anybody that watches a lot of city council meetings understands that I believe the U.S. government and the state of California has too high payroll taxes. We're talking about minimum wage, living wage. Look at the taxes that come out to the individuals. We need to be talking about that also. I would love to do a study, because hopefully the understanding at the end would be that yes, we are behind, but so is the state and so is the federal government with how much payroll taxes are taken out. I'm an employer. I understand. I don't pay anybody minimum wage or even close to minimum wage. And I see those taxes going out on the employer side and the employee side. But that's another item, but I would like that to be part of the discussion. I don't know if the city of Sonoma can really tell the federal government and the state not to be charging so many Social Security and everything else payroll taxes out there, but I will be supporting this tonight.
Any other comments?
Just to Councilmember Cook, I honestly, I'm incredibly touched and happy that you support having this discussion, and I think that this is just a super meaningful thing that we can do, and a lot of stuff we do is small, and this is a really powerful thing that we can do, and I thank you so much.
So I was just, while the speakers were here, I was listening as well as running a couple of numbers. So we have a 3.2% unemployment rate in Sonoma County right now. Petaluma and Sebastopol, I think it said there was $13.66 for workers, employers who offer medical benefits, and $15.32 for people without benefits. In the business that I'm in, I work in the backs of a lot of kitchens, supermarkets, and places like that. And there's a whole group of people that move around to restaurants and businesses like that. And most people can't find anybody for $15 an hour in Sonoma. Most restaurants, most people are paying that. And we talk about the price of a pizza. Imagine if we made the minimum wage $20 an hour, how much a slice of pizza would cost then. I mean, those are things that I think about. And then I think about all of the food service folks, wait staff, et cetera, how, you know, they might get paid whatever the minimum wage is now in California, and then they work on tips. Some of them make massive tips. Some people in Sonoma make $200 to $300 a night in tips. So how do we have to be conscious, and I'm happy to have the discussion down the road. We obviously don't have any of the business community here at this meeting, and I'm pretty positive that we would. But what I see in talking to people and being involved, we don't pay in our family or my business to pay anybody anything less than $25 an hour, because that's what you can get people for. And I think we need to, when we talk about there's people out there making $10 an hour, I don't know any of the business people that I know that are paying anybody $10 an hour. And I don't know who they are or where they are, but those are probably folks that I wouldn't be trading with. In other words, if people aren't taking care of their employees and what have you, but also the opportunity right now with all of the opportunities in Sonoma County, and I realize housing is high, but I bought my house here when I couldn't afford it in 1994. And, you know, houses then were $250,000. I took a chance. I worked below minimum wage when I was a kid. When I was 14, working for a supermarket in Santa Rosa, and I worked for 75 cents an hour because there was a job there, and that's the place everybody wanted to work. So I did that. And dealing with traffic, if we made our minimum wage so high that everybody wanted to drive to Sonoma to work, that might be a little interesting as well. But I'm happy to have the discussion. I think we don't have enough information yet, and I think a study might find that people are making more money than we think in Sonoma. And I know there's isolated cases of folks that don't make money and people that are struggling. I've served 6 years on the food bank board of directors. I'm involved in lots of things where we help people, our family, we help people. So I'll be open to having the conversation, but I think we might find different numbers when we actually look at it.
I'm a little torn on this one. I'm a little torn on this one because I absolutely support a robust minimum wage. I come from the East Coast where my first restaurant job paid $2.13 an hour, and that was only in 2006. But I remain convinced that the biggest contribution that the city of Sonoma can do to help our workers is housing, because I make above minimum wage, but I rent an apartment, and I know that if I lost my apartment, I'm not really sure where I would go, because you look at the prices of the places that are on there, and even if you calculate it out based on, what a sort of laudable minimum wage would be, it still is tough, and that's still not going to add any housing to our stocks. And one of my frustrations is that housing is one of those things that people love to campaign on, and then when you get up here, suddenly it's very quiet. So I just don't want to do anything that's just going to push housing further down the list, because I think that that is the number one thing that we as a city can do for people as a matter of economics, the environment, and social justice. And I think that is something that has to continue forward, and I am hesitant to put anything else above the list in that regard. However, there is some information that I would like to know about our wages in town, thinking about speculating about who would be paying what. I have a small business. I know it's a different relationship that people have with their employees than, say, a bigger store. And so it would be interesting to see what the data is as to what people are getting paid. But I just want to see, as far as the cost benefit of exactly the cost to the city. I mean, because having a minimum wage, you just can't add a minimum wage. You have to go add a whole department of your city that's going to process these things that the state does for us. But so I just want to see what that is compared to how it would play out as far as benefits, and to make the best way for the city to be most effective. As far as larger jurisdictions, whether it's at the county, whether it's California, continuing to raise ours, certainly at the national level. I think there's other areas that you get on board. I absolutely support that. But to get on this train, there's more information I would like to know about exactly what our wages are. So that's where I'll leave it.
Well, thank you all. It's interesting. I've spoken to the city manager, and we were talking about putting agendas together, and we may not agree, but, so far we just do city business. I consider this to be council's business, to discuss the living wage, to discuss minimum wage, because with big corporations, they have research and development, and I think we're the people that do the research, because we're the ones that think a little differently than the city government. I've heard some good comments, because I actually think some good questions will come out of this, which I'm really happy about. I was looking at the council discussion from 2014, and I remember I don't believe I was on, I don't remember, but my name isn't in here, so I'm sure I wasn't. But I remember they wanted to look at the UC Berkeley Labor Research Center, and I think there were other avenues, but I don't know how that was, that information was forwarded or resolved. So that's where we are. It looks like, I feel that I do support this. I think this is something that is an honorable thing to do. I'm not a business person, so, you know, I don't know what it's like to make a payroll for anybody. I've done it a few times. I know. I've done it a few times running big campaigns, and knowing how hard that is. But I'm really interested in moving forward on this. So thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Harrington, for bringing this to us.
So, Council, maybe if you want to take your vote, but I do want to talk about timing. And so if you would not put a time within the motion, then we can talk about that separately if we could do. If there is an action to move forward, if there's a majority, it sounds like there is to move forward. I do want to talk about timing.
Okay. I will make the motion, and I also wanted to say, you know, not to be too effusive, but this really is an incredible group of city council members, really thoughtful and considerate and collegial, and all the comments tonight I think were really heartfelt and honestly considered, and so it's my pleasure to be on here with these other people. I make a motion to hold a study session to review the city's living wage ordinance, get a report on council 2014 direction regarding the minimum wage study, and 3, consider issuing an RFP to hire a consultant to study the feasibility impacts of raising the minimum wage in the city of Sonoma. I will second that.
And so let me I'd just like a point of clarification, so I'm clear about deliverables. So the process on this, should council move forward, would be do a study session on those 3 things. We would not be bringing a study forward at that first study session. It really would be a chance for you to sit down and get some broader background, understand the issues, et cetera. And then going forward, then if council wanted to move forward, then to say go do an RFP, then that would be a next step. Because in the interim, there would be a little bit of research to understand what could that even cost. So, because part of what you're doing at this point is by taking an action of saying you want to agendize, as a council, you are saying that this is a priority and you want staff to now put some time into it. That's part of why we do this process, because you have goals and you have things we're working on. So now if council moves forward and says this is something we want to do, then we'll put the appropriate staff time to prepare, and so you then can have that study session. So are we in agreement? I just want to make sure that we
I think
have
it's
consistency.
like a little confusing because of our 2-step process where we almost had a study session-esque conversation tonight, but since we haven't actually had the hearing, we will still need to have the hearing to discuss whether we want to do the RFP or not, right?
Correct. Okay.
Well, and I think our economic business and development partnership, or whatever we're calling it now, I think that they have been collecting data as far as our local employers. So perhaps we could ask them what they have, and it'd be interesting to look at.
The other option council may want to consider, just in terms of process on this, is we're putting together kind of the study session, whether you want to have a subcommittee, whether it's Mayor Pro Tem Harrington and one other council member. These types of things that we flesh them out sometimes can be helpful to have a subcommittee. That's just another idea that if you want to think about that as well, or we could do that at the next stage.
So that's not on the agenda at this point, so.
It's not on the agenda, but you have the ability to add subcommittees based on, if you would like.
This evening? Are you saying this evening?
Yes, we put that language within the agenda. Sorry, I'm looking for it now.
Last page.
Yeah, it's on the very back of the page at the bottom of right before underneath 7. So it's just a suggestion as a process. If you don't want to, you don't need to. But as we're scoping out a study session, part of what a study session is make sure that we've got kind of good information, some background information, that we're representing all sides, that you all can then make some informed decisions. So that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'm not in favor of a subcommittee. I'd rather have a subcommittee on housing before we put one on on this.
Well, that's great. Well, that's not in the conversation.
But it's in my head, so.
Okay, and so are you looking for a subcommittee? Or is it something that you want to consider?
I mean, I'm happy to, obviously, prior to the study session, I'll be meeting with like different various, community groups and people and talking with the city. So I'm happy to provide, whatever feedback and materials I have to the city. I don't know if it requires.
That's fine. And other council members, if you have ideas, you can provide them to staff, and then again, we'll put that together. So, and then sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted for public, so they understand. One thing that the council does is we always have our council goals. And I know I've been on the council for 6 years, been accused of not worrying about housing. Housing's one of my top priorities. This year, one of the things that a lot of, I know myself, and I've heard some of my colleagues talk about it, is try to take a couple of issues that we can tackle. And this is why, because this process, now we're talking about study session, when people will come in 6 months and say, we're kicking the can down the road, and actually what we're doing is we're collecting the data to make sure that we have all the information to make, the right decision. Because to make a decision on the minimum wage or the fair wage or any other issue, even with housing, there's things that you have to understand as a council member or an elected official and even public to do that. So that's what we're talking about. As far as the subcommittee, I do agree with Councilmember Edwards. I think that I would like to see, and I'm hoping the city manager is going to tell us that this is something that we can do quickly. And if we are going to be putting it off a little bit, I would like that once we start that discussion, that we continue within a 2 week to a 1 month. So we aren't kicking the can down the road, which has happened with cannabis and other issues.
Well, my comment towards that is that we already have, there's like things in the pipe. There's cannabis in the pipe, there's the water rates in the pipe, there's the housing impact thing. These are all things. So what has happened in the past is something comes up and everything gets pushed back. And then at the end, everyone's wondering, like, why didn't we get to that thing? It's because things keep coming ahead of it. So we have to decide, like, is this taking precedent over all of those things? Or are we going to schedule it, we're working on all those things, and then we're going to get to it? Because I think giving it a month timeline means that cannabis gets put on hold, housing impact fees gets put further
I was
down the
talking
line.
about the time between. If we have a study session, then where we can come back and have, after reading the feasibility study or what information we get get from that document, that we can move that forward. One thing I don't want to do is I don't want to have a study session in 6 months and then discuss all the findings in the next year, and that puts us way behind. I probably won't even be on the council before the end of that.
Can I just suggest that we have a vote on the study session? I don't think we had a roll call on that.
Yeah,
and
let's finish that, and then we can come back to timing.
Pardon? So could I have a roll call, and what are we doing this on?
So we're
Three
doing
or
a.
three?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I made a motion to hold a study session to 1, review the city's living wage ordinance, 2, report on council 2014 direction regarding a minimum wage study, and 3, issuing an RFP to hire a consultant to study the feasibility and impacts of raising the minimum wage in the city of Sonoma.
So roll call, please.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Hunley?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you.
So now in terms of timing, Mayor Pro Tem Harrington, you had raised the question of having this done by the end of March. And so in terms of a study session, I guess what I'm looking at is we've got a couple of appeals that are coming forward to council in January, February, development appeals. We've also got the water rate study, the tasting rooms, and cannabis. All of those are some fairly tight timeline. Sorry, say again?
Housing impact fee?
Housing impact fee also. So there's a variety of things that have been in the queue, and that these were priorities the council said were important. And we also have our regular budget process. So my concern is, kind of the scope of the study session, and if it's a kind of a preliminary conversation, but if you really at that point are going to be making a go, no-go decision, then we need to make sure that, you've got full information to be able to do that. So I'm worried about March. I think the end of March was your original recommendation. If we could say the end of May, I think I'd feel more comfortable. But because, again, we've got these other things that are teed up. And going to Councilmember Cook's process, I think the other question is looking at, once, if council does decide to move forward and then you do the study, I don't know how long it takes a firm to do the study. My sense is that's probably, at least a 3-month process, if not longer as well. So, but that's a piece of information we could gather in between. So there are a variety of big projects that are already kind of in the queue, and so that's something I guess I'd like council to consider if you're going to set a time, or we look at this globally. We're going to be having some kind of a retreat in January, February, looking at some kind of a variety of things. It's time for us to sit down, and we could look at scheduling there as well.
I guess my thoughts would be, if we did it in May, which is fine, that I would want the agenda item to include the cost of an RFP. So if we decided to issue the RFP, it could be done at that time. Then it could be, if it's approved, the study set, they could prepare the report over the summer, and then we could hopefully hear it before the end of the year.
I think that's a reasonable request. I think that's part of based on where we need, that would be a piece of information you all would need to understand.
So May's fine with me. I don't know if you wanted this informal conversation about that.
Do I need a roll call for?
No, I don't
It's
think we
just
need, just kind of in general, if folks are comfortable with that. I mean, we can work those through, but just want to kind of be clear about some expectations for both council and community as we're juggling a variety of priorities. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, moving on to 6. Oh, you need a break? Yeah, okay, we'll take a break. So did you want to go? Do you want to leave? Or are you just in a coma? I'm going to go. Or are you just in a coma?
But I'm going to go, I think I'll go at 7.
Yes, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. We're going to be taking a strict 5-minute break, as our former mayor used to call it.
Underwriting is provided by Sonoma Paint Center. Writing is provided by Sonoma Paint Center, located at 815 West Napa Street. For more information, you can go to sonomapaintcenter.com. And Larbury Automotive, located at 18155 Sonoma Highway. For more information, you can go to larburyauto.com.
Moving on to 6.5. 5, consideration, discussion, and possible action to provide direction on community-based process for cannabis exploration, approving a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Muni Services Financial for consulting and approving transfer of general fund reserves of $17,000 for prior work and Phase 1 exploratory process planning director. So I'm turning this over to planning director.
Our planning
he
director
ill?
also is ill with, I think, the similar situation that other members of the council have, so.
Is it officially now called a plague or something here in Sonoma?
It is not a fun
Everybody-
Christmas sickness by any
The
stretch.
Christmas plague of 2018.
So I'm going to play Mr. Goodison tonight. So council, if you are well aware, on December 4th, we had a conversation and got direction from council on a variety of cannabis issues. One, you gave us direction on personal cultivation, and so we'll be moving forward to bring you back an ordinance in probably February that will allow a personal cultivation of 6 marijuana plants per residence, subject to some of the basic restrictions, and then outdoor, those same kind of restrictions that were in the urgency ordinance, and then outdoor cultivation being prohibited except in a greenhouse. And then in addition, council wanted to explore medicinal cannabis and testing and manufacturing for medicinal cannabis. So those items were also as part of an exploration process. And so and you wanted a community-based process. So the next steps really, as you know, we have had Muni Services, and Jeff Cullen is here on my left, who has been assisting us. They represent cities across the state and have some expertise. Some of their folks out of Colorado, and also some of their team has worked with the state as well, so understands some of the regulations there. And so Muni Services, what is before you is to have them assist us with a community-based process. Again, you've heard some of the workload that we have as a staff, and it's great to have their expertise. So we're looking at 2 kind of community town halls or workshops that we would do in February or March. We might do some kind of a survey to get a pulse as well. And then the other work that Muni Services would do would be looking at some of the both cost recovery and potential taxes, so you could take that into consideration as you make a decision. And then they would put that all together kind of in a report, and that would come back to you for a decision in probably April. And with that, at that point, we'd be asking council, okay, you now have this package of information. You've been able to get some additional grounding. We may also do some tours, because it may be helpful to see and touch and look at some of these. And then looking at April to make a decision, either to not move forward or to move forward. And if we are moving forward, we did include in your agenda packet kind of a phase 2, so you understood what level of work is there. And if council does want to move forward, that would be a fairly tight timeline to move everything forward between April and June or July, if there was going to be any action to put something on the ballot, and also to do any kind of selection process should council decide to do that. So at this point, the request in front of you is to approve a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Muni Services, and that's for $12,000 for this phase 1. It's also for $5,000 of the work they've done for us so far, by pulling that out of our current budget, because it was kind of an unexpected item that came up, and gives us some additional flexibility for other work that we need within the city manager's budget. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Jeff Cullen is here. He can also speak to you about any questions or information you have as well.
Do I have any questions from the city council?
So when it gets to the portions that involve the public, especially there was a survey, how are these things communicated to the public so that we actually have participation?
Well, this is something, and I'll let Jeff speak as well. This is something I wouldn't have tried before, frankly, some of the work that we've done since September of updating the website, mean, we didn't really have, I think, enough tools to really get the word out before. I also think kind of the social media and the following that we now have on Facebook, again, that we didn't have before September. The numbers were far lower coming out of the fire, but there's a lot more. So I think that we have the tools in place now that you could do something, and if we're able to get it out with enough notice and thoroughly, then we could put something up, and we'd want to make sure that we could do this where people aren't able to kind of do the survey twice. There's some parameters, and it may be that we aren't able to do it, but Muni Services has done this in some other places. I've seen and looked at about 7 or 8 different surveys, and it can potentially give council a pulse check. It is not necessarily going to be statistically accurate or something that you can hold on to that way, but it's another data point, and it is a way for folks to potentially give a voice who might not come down to a council meeting. So I'm not saying it is a mandatory piece. I've left as an optional piece and something we want to explore a little more. I think if we felt like we could put a good product out with good process and good outreach, we'd want to do it. If we don't feel like we can do that, then I don't think we would end up weaving it within.
Did you say something being on the ballot? What was that?
Yeah, I'll start and then head off to Jeff. So if we are going to potentially put a tax on in November for any of these items, that would need to be voter approved. So Jeff, do you want to comment at all?
Sure, and the timing for that is we would need to know, get that direction in June or July, so we'd have time to create the ballot language and meet the deadline for placing the item on the ballot in November.
And typically that timeline, if you're putting a measure on, it's usually about the first week in August is the deadline. And then you've got to put ballot statements on, et cetera. So you really need to be doing this work in June and coming into June and July so that you can make those deadlines with the elections office.
Does anyone have any other questions? I have a question that the business of surveys, of course, they're all directed. So is that a viable place to go to do surveys from our population?
Can you explain what you mean
Like
a little more?
Calling people, finding out just randomly. I mean, I'm sure these things are targeted, to.
So it's a really good question. Let me elaborate. The survey we're talking about here would not be a phone survey, like the traditional phone surveys, because that literally would be another probably $25,000.
Okay.
So here, this would be a web-based survey that would be voluntary for folks to fill out. So that's why I'm saying it's not necessarily, you're not doing it's within 5% of accuracy, that type of thing. It's really a pulse. I have seen this being done in other communities, and I think if you get some good outreach, it can be helpful. You've definitely got to have kind of a good survey, and you've got to build a good enough outreach. And again, it's not meant to say it's one additional piece of information in addition to what you're hearing from residents as they talk to you at the grocery store, what you're hearing at council meetings, and what you're going to hear at study sessions, and what you're observing yourselves.
So isn't there a chance of it being skewed in some way?
Good.
Yes, I think there is that risk. You try to mitigate that risk by broadly advertising and noticing the availability of the survey. You can also build some questions into the survey process itself that ask people to identify their address or whether they're a city resident or not, and get some controls in the survey itself so that you try to limit the ability for people to take it multiple times or recruit people to give input into the process one way or another.
Thank you.
Maybe survey is the wrong word because it sounds like it's a poll, which it isn't a poll. It's like an additional opportunity for public comment that isn't in the city council chambers.
Agreed. And there can be some open-ended and, then there's some questions as well. So it is a way to have some additional voices participate in the process.
The only other thing I would add is I think the timing of that input is also important. We recommend that you do that after you've done some of your public education efforts and community meetings, so that people have an opportunity to ask questions and get answers to those questions, and learn a little bit more about some of the possible controls the city is considering as it moves forward with the cannabis industry.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Having none, I'll take it out to the public.
This is just cautionary. Hi, it's Richard. 95 Bernhardt. I just have a couple questions for the gentleman in the very snazzy attire. And also to our illustrious city manager. From what I gathered, you were saying that when the report is completed, it will be uploaded to a publicly accessible site, i.e. the Sonoma City site, where we could actually go through the PowerPoint or however the report's being presented. And that would include, I assume, because I haven't seen the RFP or the scope of work document from the city to your illustrious firm, that it would include primary citing for any statements or references in the report. Is that a fair assumption?
Yes, I think that's a fair assumption. We would make the report available to the city. The city
Okay.
could post that on its website.
Okay.
And by the way, the scope of work is a part of the agenda item tonight.
Okay.
And is publicly available if you wish to review it.
Well, I didn't go down and get very granular to see that, yes, it would be primary sightings, et cetera, so that when the survey is appended to it, at least people could go to a primary source to better understand something that you had either alluded to, referred to, or stated. Okay?
Be happy to include that.
It's
And I wanted to explain the attire. It is all new. Recently purchased within the last couple of months
Thank
because
you.
I lost my entire wardrobe and my home in the Santa Rosa fire.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Had I known when I worked at Patrick James selling garb for Goyam, I would have been more than happy to give you my discount. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Amy, really, mustard plaque.
I don't have it yet. So, Tom Conlon, 18850 Robinson Road. I'm very supportive of this item and this expenditure. I think it's a great idea for us to, I know it's been contentious up until this point, but I think we all want to move forward and make some good decisions about how to integrate cannabis into the zeitgeist of Sonoma. So, I think this is frankly exactly what you guys need to make a well-informed decision, and I think the community needs to move forward. I also was at the Tourism Improvement District meeting this past week, and I know that they're considering a study of tourism, quantifying the benefits of tourism to the city and the valley. And I also know that you have a moratorium on wine bars and that kind of business model here. And when I read through this, I just went, oh, this is exactly the kind of information we need about the alcohol-based businesses that we have in this town, to have a sense of the number, size, and ideal locations, some recommendations from an impartial assessment of our community. So I would encourage you to think creatively, to have the study sessions prior to committing to the survey, so that you don't, so you get some input before you go out and do quantification, and even consider perhaps coordinating or even potentially integrating with that other study that the Tourism Improvement District is considering. I know that it's difficult to get different consultants with different scopes of work to be able to work together effectively, but perhaps phasing could be part of the solving of this challenge. But I think this is a wonderful template for thinking through some of our broader integrated tourism planning issues, especially on the recreational cannabis side if we in fact choose to go in that direction. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or from the public?
Gil Latimer, 1055 Grant Court in Sonoma. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening to the council and staff. I'm here tonight representing the Sonoma Valley Cannabis Group, a local grassroots organization of nearly 200 members, all patients and their families who are greatly concerned about local access to medical cannabis. We would like to thank the City Council and its staff for moving forward on this issue. We appreciate that the citizens of Sonoma now have the opportunity to help guide this discussion to an outcome that could benefit everyone. In order to build on the momentum created by the Council's support for Option 2, we support the staff's recommendation to enter into an agreement with Muni Services. As always, SVCG is well prepared to offer its experience, resources, and recommendations to this process. We have many contacts and resources within the industry, and should you have any questions, we will be happy to provide any supplemental information that might be helpful to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any, oops.
Thank you. Julia Matheson, 1396 Lubick Street. I'm a founding member of Sonoma Patient Group. We're the oldest cannabis dispensary in Sonoma County. We're located in Santa Rosa. I just want to thank the council, Madam Mayor, and the council and the city for moving forward. I know it's a contentious topic, and I really appreciate you for allowing safe access to become a reality. I am advocating for my 20,000 patients. One of my patients said to me last week, why are you working on this so hard? You're going to lose me as a patient. This is not, I will lose patients. Sonoma Patient Group will lose a lot of patients if there's a dispensary in Sonoma. We'll lose all the patients coming from Napa, Calistoga, anywhere this side of the 101. They're going to choose to come to Sonoma before they go anywhere else. I do it because it's the right thing to do. I do it to advocate for my patients, not because it's going to be financially beneficial to me or my business. I also want to point out that at the November 17th through 19th California Democratic Party Executive Board meeting, a resolution calling on the Democratic Party to encourage, quote, counties and cities to cease banning and to enact ordinances regulating the commercial cultivation, manufacturing, and sale of cannabis, end quote. The resolution was passed unanimously and is now the official policy of the California Democratic Party. I ask you to honor this new policy directive from the State Democratic Party. I'd also like you to know that according to a state-by-state data compiled by the U.S. Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration, the enactment of statewide adult use marijuana regulations is not associated with increased trends of youth use, access, or abuse. The 2015-2016 National Survey on Drug Use and Health reports recent declines in cannabis use by teens in most jurisdictions where adult use is legally regulated, including Colorado, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, and the District of Columbia. In Colorado, cannabis use has fallen to its lowest level in nearly a decade among adolescents. And basic child psychology, when you forbid a teen to do something, that's the first thing they're going to want to do. Most acknowledge that it's medicine, they're not going to want to do their grandmother's or mother's medicine. I want to thank you again for moving forward on this contentious topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Having none, I'm going to bring this back to the council for input and further direction. So I think.
I am ecstatic to be at this point, and I look forward to the next steps. and I hope that everyone will help spread the word, because as we move forward, we still are not on a definite path towards a dispensary. So I want to keep picking up support for that, if that's what you're into. And I would like to make a motion man. Oh, the resolution. God, how does this work? I got it. I would like to make a motion to adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma appropriating $17,000 from unallocated general fund reserves and authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with Muni Services for the purpose of obtaining consulting assistance in implementing a community-based process to investigate, evaluate, and develop local regulations on commercial cannabis.
Second.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Hunley?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Mayor Agramonte and council. So each year, the council at this time adopts an annual calendar. And so there attached is a calendar for you to consider. And one of the important things is by setting a regular calendar, on those regular council meetings, you can then take action on ordinances and those types of things that we can't do at a special meeting. So, and it's important to lay a calendar out. So we've had a few conversations about calendaring individually, and one of the things that I've explored a little bit with some of you is shifting to a Wednesday calendar. And shifting to a Wednesday calendar, I think, has a variety of positive aspects in terms of potentially allowing, I think, better coverage with our local newspaper, having you guys not have to necessarily be spending your weekend talking to constituents and having a little more time. However, in my desire to bring things forward, I missed a big piece here. So I had 2 draft agendas, and at this point I need you only to consider the Monday agenda. The Wednesday agenda, I mistakenly did not include the schedule of our city attorney, who represents another agency. So the Wednesday, we had a variety of other moving parts that we were putting in and looking at. I had Jeff's notes of when he was available, and they did not get put in. In addition, moving to a Wednesday schedule is a little tricky because we also have the CSEC that meets on a Wednesday and the SVCAC that meet on Wednesday. So for tonight, actually, I'm going to ask you to just approve the Monday calendar. We can always make adjustments later on because this is just done by a council action. However, if you wanted us to explore a Wednesday calendar and give us some, we could look at that and then come back a little later in the year and see if that's possible. But it does mean moving some other things around and shifting some things. So my apologies. I was hopeful that we could kind of pull it all together, but there are the Wednesdays, there are these pieces that make it a little more difficult. And then my apologies for not getting our city attorney's schedule lined up within this as we were scurrying to put it forward in front of you. So,
Are there any comments or questions for the council?
Is there some reason that Tuesday isn't good?
I think the farmer's market is the piece that I've heard on the Tuesdays, and I know that our city attorney also represents another jurisdiction on Tuesdays that meets regularly. So I think it is a Monday or Wednesday is what we're looking at.
So with the conflict now, I know in 2013 was the last year that we had Wednesday meetings, and then we moved them for one council member particularly. So what was that like? How did we work out and have, I believe it was Wednesday meetings for a long time before that.
Well, I think obviously one thing would be with the CSCC, as the council, you could have your CSCC meet on another day. And you're going to have a constituted CSCC, and so that could be set up, and that's an easier one to move. The Sonoma Valley CAC also meets on the last Wednesday of the month. Sometimes that's the 4th Wednesday, sometimes that's the 5th Wednesday. We would need to talk with them about if there's any ability for them to move those dates. Move their time, because you really, if you're going to pick a Wednesday, you do want to have some flexibility to have at least 2 Wednesdays set. And it's going to need to be looking at more the 2nd and the 4th, and if we're going to do that, then we've got to move 2 meetings.
So are you, could I ask, do you prefer, do you like the idea?
I've been fighting to get this back to Wednesday since we were first elected. It's just the way that it goes with the weekend, getting the packet on a Thursday or Friday, and then spending the weekend, and then people just aren't really thinking about the meeting, and then suddenly it's Monday and it's happening. I just think that people would read the news, be more likely to show up at meetings, and it would just be easier for me to be able to talk to people about things not over the weekend. I've always thought it should move back to Wednesday.
So the SBCAC, they're meeting here all the time. And when I was in the SBCAC, we met at Altamira. We met at different places, and we were all over the place. Actually, Firehouse. We have lots of other options for the SBCAC. I think Firehouse might be a great option for that. And I think I needed Mondays, because I was on a couple of boards that met on Wednesday, so I wasn't fighting anybody.
David?
Yeah, no, I understand everything, but I did like Wednesdays. I served as a council member when we had the Wednesday meetings, and I liked them. And then it switched over. It was actually Mayor Rouse that it switched over back to Monday, because he was out of town during the week. I found the great benefits, and just for my colleagues, because I did serve on those, was the agenda would still come out on Thursday. You would have a lot more time to talk to constituents. It seemed like it was better attended. And since I'm a National Football League fan still, but it would be nice to watch Monday Night Football. But other than that, I would like to see it on Wednesday, but I understand with conflict, so I'll leave that up to my council colleagues on that.
Did you have something?
Oh, I prefer Wednesday as well for all the reasons stated.
So could I ask Councilmember Edwards, did you say you have a conflict on Wednesday?
No,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I used to.
heard.
I've termed out.
Oh, okay. All right, so you've heard, it sounds as if it's agreeable to look at Wednesdays. I don't know, as Jeff said, maybe offering another location, or was it Gary? Maybe another location for the other meeting.
So what I'd like council to do, I appreciate that feedback and a chance for you guys to hear from each other, this interest as well. So what I'd ask you to do tonight is to approve the Monday schedule. We have a lot of things that are teed up for in January and February that we want to get set and get done. We'll probably stick with kind of what looks like that Monday schedule. It's really a Monday and a Wednesday within January and February because of some of the holidays. And then we'll look at if we can do some calendar and meeting room moving around and some choreography, and maybe look at coming back and starting and bringing you a schedule that we can look at for a Wednesday in March or April.
So I'll make a motion to approve the Monday schedule. And
I think we need public comment.
Real quick. Just to add, the newspaper schedule is another benefit for Wednesday.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from the public? Having none, bring it back to the council.
I still move to approve Monday.
Second.
To approve the Monday calendar at this point? Okay, but you've heard our comments?
Yep.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye.
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrington?
Aye.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Mayor Agramonte?
Aye.
Thank you.
So, Rachel, did you do the dedications before the reports? So, okay. Council member reports and comments by Amy. None? By Amy. Thank you. And now the city manager's report. I've lost you.
None this evening, thank you.
All right, and I'd like to, before I adjourn, I'd like to remind us of our dedications this evening. Marilyn Duggan Caselli, and also Mayor Ed Lee. Thank you so much, council member. Good night, everybody. Good night. Oh, take care of yourselves.